12,000 years ago, people carved hundreds of cryptic images into stone pillars, now called Göbekli Tepe, symbols so strange that no archaeologist could agree on what they meant. Decades of searching for answers failed. But now, with AI scanning every groove, researchers trace patterns invisible to human eyes and claim to have cracked a code buried for millennia, rewriting what we know about the first symbolic minds. But how solid is this breakthrough, and what did we overlook for so long? In the arid uplands of southeastern Turkey, a shepherd's chance discovery in 1994 revealed something that would upend the story of human beginnings. Beneath a low grassy mound, archaeologist Klaus Schmidt and his team uncovered massive T-shaped pillars, each rising up to 6 meters from the limestone bedrock. The stones, some weighing as much as 20 tons, stood in rings and ovals, their surfaces crowded with reliefs of animals, abstract marks, and enigmatic symbols. Radiocarbon dating placed their creation between 9,600 BCE and 8,000 BCE, making them older than Stonehenge, the pyramids, and even the first known farming villages. The scale of the site defied expectations for its time. More than 20 circular enclosures have been identified, each anchored by pairs of central pillars and surrounded by walls lined with more monoliths. So far, excavations have exposed only a fraction of what lies beneath the hill. Geophysical surveys suggest hundreds of pillars remain buried, hinting at a complex far larger than anything previously imagined from the world of hunter-gatherers. Each pillar is carved from local limestone, shaped with flint tools and then hauled upright. The largest stand over 6 meters tall, their broad faces oriented toward one another in silent dialogue. Carvings of foxes, vultures, snakes, and scorpions crowd the surfaces, their forms stylized and repetitive. Some pillars bear abstract shapes, H-like figures, circles, and lines, arranged with a precision that suggests deliberate planning. Despite the absence of pottery, metal, or evidence of permanent dwellings, the builders organized the labor to quarry, transport, and erect these stones, all without the wheel or domesticated animals. The sheer antiquity of Gobekli Tepe challenges every assumption about the origins of monumental architecture. Here, at least 2 millennia before the first cities, people gathered to create something vast and enduring. The site's age and its physical grandeur raise questions that have haunted archaeologists for decades. Who built these circles and why? The answers remain elusive, buried in stone and time, waiting for new ways of seeing to bring them to light. Archaeologists spent decades confronting a wall of silence at Gobekli Tepe. The pillars stood loaded with carvings, foxes, vultures, snakes, abstract H-shapes, yet their meaning remained just out of reach. The challenge was not a lack of effort, but a lack of context. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, there was no bilingual inscription to unlock the code. Every symbol was isolated, stripped of written explanation, and repeated across the site with only subtle variations. Researchers leaned on what they had: visual comparisons and ethnographic analogies. They scoured the region's later myths, hoping to spot echoes in the stone. Some saw totems of animal clans, others imagined shamanic rituals or stories of creation and death. None of these readings could be verified. The symbols were too abstract, the repetition too relentless. Each new guess seemed to circle back to the same uncertainty. Manual documentation made matters overwhelming. Every relief had to be traced by hand, cataloged in notebooks, and compared one by one. With more than 200 distinct motifs scattered across dozens of pillars, the workload was overwhelming. Subtle differences in carving depth or sequence went unnoticed, lost in the flatness of photographs and sketches. The sheer number of pattern combinations was beyond what any person could process. Without a system to organize the chaos, interpretation drifted toward the familiar. Ritual became the default explanation, a catch-all for anything mysterious or unexplained. Symbols were assumed to serve ceremonial purposes, their arrangement chalked up to myth or magic. This bias shaped the field for years, discouraging alternative theories that might have looked for structure or communication. As the years passed, frustration grew. The stones refused to give up their secrets, and the promise of understanding remained just out of reach. With no new tools to break the deadlock, The story of Göbekli Tepe's symbols seemed destined to remain an unsolved puzzle until technology offered a way to see what the human eye could not. Laser scanners hum quietly in the pre-dawn light, their beams sweeping the ancient stones with a precision no human hand could match. Over the last few years, archaeologists at Göbekli Tepe have turned to high-resolution 3D scanning, determined to capture every groove, notch, and weathered edge in the limestone. The hardware in use, LiDAR units capable of measuring features down to 1/10 of a millimeter, transforms the pillars into dense clouds of digital points, each one a precise record of the stone's surface. It is a level of detail that outpaces anything possible with photographs or hand tracings. Dr. Ebru Korkmaz, a specialist in digital archaeology, oversees the process from a makeshift workstation near the site. She and her team orchestrate the scanning of all 266 exposed pillars, methodically rotating the laser heads to minimize shadows and distortions. The raw data pours into servers as billions of points, each tagged with exact X, Y, and Z coordinates. To handle this massive volume, the data is filtered through a voxel grid, shrinking the cloud to a manageable size without losing critical detail. Each grid cell, just 10 centimeters across, preserves the subtle variations in carving depth and angle that once escaped notice. The scans reveal more than just surface texture. By analyzing the depth of each incision, algorithms can reconstruct the sequence in which the carvings were made. On some pillars, the fox reliefs were cut first, their outlines crisp and deep. While abstract H-shapes were added later, their edges slightly shallower and more eroded. This layering of marks, invisible to the naked eye, hints at a complex choreography of carving, perhaps unfolding over months or even years. For the first time, researchers can rotate and zoom in on every symbol, comparing micro details across the site without risking damage to the stone. Patterns that once blurred together now stand apart, subtle tool marks, repeated motifs, and even faint traces of pigment embedded in the grooves. The digital models allow for side-by-side analysis of pillars separated by dozens of meters, exposing alignments and repetitions that manual sketches had missed. The result is a new kind of archaeological record, not just a catalog of images, but a three-dimensional map of intent and technique. With this data in hand, Dr. Korkmaz and her colleagues are poised to ask questions that were once unthinkable. How were the symbols planned and executed? Did different groups carve in distinct styles, or does a single hand shape the entire site? The answers lie hidden in the patterns, waiting for the next phase of analysis to bring them into focus. A torrent of data pours across Dr. Korkmaz's screens. Algorithms churn through the digital models, flagging every carved mark, every subtle groove. Patterns begin to rise from the noise. Out of more than 200 distinct motifs, the analysis isolates a core set, 20 pictographs that appear again and again, scattered across the pillars like a hidden vocabulary. Foxes, snakes, H-shapes, vultures, and scorpions dominate, but it's the arrangement, not just the images, that draws attention. Statistical tools measure the co-occurrence of these symbols. On the exposed pillars, snakes and H-shapes are found together 68% of the time. In the earliest layers, this pairing climbs to 92% before dropping to 58% in later phases. Such consistency is unlikely to be random. The same clusters repeat in different enclosures, separated by both time and space, yet the order of symbols barely changes. What once seemed a jumble of decoration now reveals a grammar, an underlying structure that hints at rules and intention. The algorithms track not only which symbols appear, but how they're positioned. On Pillar 43, the so-called vulture stone, the sequence vulture, scorpion, headless man, repeats with slight variations across other pillars, as if echoing a story or marking a cycle. The depth and order of carvings, mapped in 3 dimensions, show deliberate layering. Older marks are deeper, fresher, and often serve as the base for newer, shallower additions. This temporal layering suggests that the carvings were not made in a single event, but over years, perhaps even generations, with each addition respecting an invisible template. The numbers tell a story of intention. Across the site, the same 20 pictographs account for the vast majority of carvings. The recurrence of specific pairings, like the fox in H shape or the snake in circle, defies the odds of chance. Even as the site evolves, the core set persists, reshuffled but never abandoned. The evidence points to a symbolic system, structured and shared, rooted in memory and practice. For the first time, the symbols of Göbekli Tepe stand not as isolated mysteries, but as elements of a language waiting to be understood. On a warm afternoon in Edinburgh, Professor Martin Sweatman stares at a digital rendering of Pillar 43, the so-called vulture stone. Years of manual tracing and statistical modeling have led him to an audacious proposal. The symbols on this ancient pillar record a cosmic disaster. According to Sweatman's analysis, the vulture, scorpion, and other animals are not just creatures of myth, but stand-ins for constellations, Cygnus, Scorpius, Sagittarius, mapped onto the Neolithic sky. He measures the angles and spacing between the carvings, comparing them to star charts for the year 10,950 BCE. The fit is uncanny. The vulture's wing, for example, aligns within a single degree to the position of Sagittarius at the summer solstice, while the scorpion's tail matches Scorpius with equal precision. The statistical odds of these alignments occurring by chance drop below 1 in 100 million. Sweatman's team takes the analysis further. They count the V-shaped notches carved along the pillar's edge, 29 in one row, 30 in the next, mirroring the alternating length of lunar months. This pattern repeats across other pillars, suggesting a calendar system that tracks the cycles of the moon. The pillar becomes a ledger, a record of time, a warning, perhaps even a memorial to a catastrophe that reshaped the world. For Sweatman, the evidence points to a structured form of communication, a code that transcends mere decoration. The carvings, he argues, are intentional, precise, and deeply tied to the rhythms of the sky, a message from a lost world, finally coming into focus through the lens of modern science. Doubt lingers at the heart of every scientific breakthrough. In the case of Gobekli Tepe, skepticism is not just a reaction, it is a necessity. Professor Giorgio Fanti, a veteran of ancient engineering studies, has watched the rising tide of AI-driven claims with a measured eye. For Fanti and many of his colleagues, the excitement around pattern recognition and statistical matches must be tempered by rigorous standards. He points to the p-value attached to the astronomical alignment hypothesis, p equals 0.03. Statistically suggestive but not definitive. In his view, a result that hovers just above the threshold of randomness cannot overturn decades of accumulated caution. Peer review remains the gatekeeper for extraordinary claims. None of the recent AI interpretations, no matter how striking, have appeared in a recognized archaeological journal. Fanti notes that until these findings withstand the scrutiny of independent experts, they belong to the realm of hypothesis, not history. The absence of published methods, raw data, or reproducible code leaves a gap that no viral video can fill. He warns against the allure of technological certainty, reminding researchers that machines, like humans, are prone to bias when fed selective input. The debate is not just about statistics or journal citations. It is about the responsibility to separate signal from noise, especially when the stakes involve rewriting the story of human origins. Fanti's caution echoes through the field. Without transparent methods and peer-reviewed validation, every bold interpretation remains provisional. The symbols at Göbekli Tepe still guard their secrets. For now, the promise of a decoded language is a tantalizing possibility, not a settled fact. 12 Neolithic sites dot the uplands of southeastern Turkey, stretching in a loose arc over 150 kilometers. Each one, Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, Sefer Tepe, and others, features the same signature: T-shaped pillars, animal reliefs, and abstract marks that echo across the landscape. Archaeologists call this constellation Tas Tepeler, the Stone Hills. Radiocarbon dates show these sites flourished together between 9,600 and 8,800 BCE. The scale of this network raises unsettling questions. How did small bands of hunter-gatherers, without farming or cities, coordinate construction on such a scale? What kind of memory or communication could bind people across days of walking through valleys and over ridges to repeat the same motifs in stone? The recurring symbols, foxes, vultures, H shapes, are not identical, but their proportions and style remain strikingly consistent from site to site. Some researchers argue this points to a shared symbolic repertoire, a kind of regional dialect passed along gathering routes or through seasonal feasts. Others caution against seeing too much order in the chaos, reminding us that motifs can spread through imitation, not formal instruction. Still, the evidence of standardization, carvings matching in depth and proportion across distant sites, suggests more than coincidence. Even without a written language, these builders shared knowledge over distances that rival the range of modern oral traditions. If these symbols do encode information about the sky, the seasons, or the fate of the world, they hint at a level of abstract thinking and collective memory far older than civilization itself. The pillars stand as evidence that complex symbolic systems did not wait for cities or kings. They grew in the minds of people who wandered, who remembered, and who carved their warnings, hopes, or stories into stone. The origins of symbolic thought, once pinned to the rise of agriculture, now appear tangled in a much older web, one that stretches beyond a single site and perhaps beyond the limits of what can ever be fully known. Today, AI scans push archaeology to question not just old sites, but old assumptions. With every new algorithm, the line between fact and speculation sharpens, yet mysteries deepen. Göbekli Tepe's carvings remind us, technology expands what we see, but meaning still demands humility. The past isn't waiting to be solved, it's waiting to be understood. What do you see in the stones now?